I am so excited to let you hear from my pal, Maggie Rowe, the journey of Maggie Rowe. It sounds like the journey of Natty Gann, doesn't it? I first met Maggie as when she worked with Tyndale House Publishers. I published adult and children's fiction with Tyndale, worked on a couple of nonfiction projects there too. And Maggie at the time worked in the publicity department. So I would get pitches from her. Hey, would you have Ann Voskamp on? Would you have this author on? Little did I know she had a dream of writing her own book. And last year that dream became a reality. And I want to talk with her about that. She's a national speaker, dramatist, blogger, writer. She performs original one-woman dramas. She's passionate about connecting people to God and each other. She lives with her husband in Asheville, North Carolina. Maggie, how you doing today?
I am doing great, Chris. And thank you for that beautiful introduction. I don't know if anybody has ever recommended it. You ought to go into radio or something. I know you're a writer, but you kind of have a good voice for radio. So thanks for having me on. It's been good to be on the show, actually, also.
Yeah, I talked with you about seniors getting involved in life and not putting yourself on the shelf. And we're going to get to that at some point. But the title of your book is This Life We Share, 52 Reflections on Journeying Well with God and Others. It came out in May of 2020. And it was a finalist for the 2021 ECPA Awards. And the reason why I just banged on the side of my desk when I saw it was the category was not inspirational, devotional, or anything like this. It was new author. And for someone who is in her upper 60s, I mean, you were clear about, your age. Mm-hmm. That's just irony, isn't it?
Oh, Chris, I just turned 68, and I don't mind saying age because we all aspire to be older people one day, don't we? I mean, it is an aspirational thing. We want to be older, maybe right not now, but someday we do. And then suddenly you're like me, 60 years passed since I wanted to be a writer since I was probably 6. Well, literally 6 decades passed before I even submitted a proposal. It's not that I was trying all those years. I didn't try because I shut the door on myself. I kept saying, oh, nobody will ever publish the kind of stuff I write, it's more like essay form, kind of a mashup, I said to the publisher, between devotional writing and Christian living writing, and who publishes things that are mashups. But God, famous last words, but God. And yeah, and to be a finalist as a new author in a major national, kind of the pinnacle award ceremony of our industry, when you're almost 68, what's ever new when you're in your late 60s? There's not that much new that's left. So you and I had a good laugh over that because I thought, Lord, you got a purpose in this. You've got a purpose and a plan in anything. And I hope there are many men and women like I am who think, I've always loved to write, but maybe it's too late for me now. Or if I didn't get started when I'm young, who would pick up an older person? Well, you know what they do? Because we have things to say, and we've had decades of what I call emotional equity in our past. Some people call it wisdom, although that's a tricky thing. My mom used to say, Chris, she'd say, wisdom comes with age, but sometimes age comes alone. So it doesn't mean we're always wise when we're older, but we do have worldcraft. That's a new word I just learned the other day that means the accumulated wisdom and life lessons and emotional equity that we older folks have. It's worldcraft. And if we can be useful to somebody else by getting our words out there as speakers and writers, radio hosts, podcasters, whatever, then, we're not too old for God to use us. So
let's jump into that right there, because I feel like that's the number one struggle that most people who say, I have something in here that I want to get out, but I don't know how to do that. The biggest hurdle is not the editor, it's not publishing or self-publishing, it's not any of that. It's the belief that I have something to say, I have something worth saying, and that I'm not going to waste my time sitting down every day writing something that is, nothing is ever going to come of it. So it took you 6 decades, you said, before you even sent a proposal out. So how did you get over that hurdle?
Well, because I had a divine foot on my backside. I really think that was it, Chris, because I do love to write. And my little community online has been my blog readers maybe 15 years ago, encouraged by another believer who said, you need a blog. And I said, I have a following. He said, yeah, but if if one or two people were helped by whatever you could share, would that be worth it? And I said, sure. So he said, then start. I'm going to show you how to set up a website. And we did. And my blog used to be called Tuesdays with Maggie, kind of a word play on that best-selling book Tuesdays with Maury. Now it's called View from the Ridge because of where I live in the Great Smoky Mountains. But all that to say, Chris, is that I never blogged with another agenda. I blogged because I had a fire in my bones and things I wanted to share that I thought could be useful to somebody. And very, very slowly over the years, that blog community joined. It's still not grew. It's still maybe only 1,000, which is not a big platform. But if I think of it as my little church, and I'm not the pastor, I'm just one of the teachers, but I can share things with them about a lot of different subjects. It might be going through betrayal, it might be navigating grief, it might be aging gratefully, it might be any one of a number of topics. That has been the community I've been writing for. And I think I told you the story, and maybe this would encourage anybody who's joining us today, is that one of my favorite verses in scripture in terms of kingdom building is what Jesus said in Matthew 6, where he said, seek ye first my kingdom and my righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. And so that seek ye first has always been very important to me as a pastor's wife, a woman in ministry, somebody in the publishing industry, and now a writer and speaker. And as I've sought, what would God have me do? You've heard me tell the story, part of the ministry he led me into 30 years ago was sharing the stories of great women of faith who are not alive to share their own stories anymore. And when I was doing one of those one woman dramas, a publisher happened to be in the audience, publisher from Nav Press in Colorado Springs. He sent me a nice note afterwards. We became friends on social media, the way things happen. And when I would link my blog to social media, he saw a few of them, amazingly. And he reached out to me saying, you've got a book in you. I want you to send me a proposal. And Chris, it
Wow.
just doesn't happen that way. It's,
Right.
but I think how it happened is because God led me into a ministry I didn't choose, doing this drama ministry. But by being in the place where God would have me serve, that's how he connected me with the publishing industry. Interesting, not through my work as a book publicist. I never would have presumed on my employer to have them consider my work. I just wouldn't have done it. So God did it for me. So it's an amazing story.
And I think that a lot of people would say, well, that's how she got published. She knew somebody, she knew an editor where she was working. And then after
Yep.
she left there, then, and I think it's almost it's harder to be published when you're on the inside, let's say in a different role. You're not an editor, you're kind of playing a supporting role because you are pigeonholed into that. Well, no, Maggie does this over here. She doesn't write. And so it's almost harder to get over that hurdle when you're on the inside, in a way.
It is. It is. And because again, you really don't want to presume on your employer. It would be awkward for them. I know I talked to the fiction editor, whom you know, at my former publishing house, a wonderful person, the acquisitions editor. She told me once that she got about 300 proposals a month through agents alone. Agents,
Wow.
I was stunned. These aren't what we call over the transom, unsolicited manuscripts. These were screen vetted, good writers, good proposals, good hooks, well written material, 300 a month. And that was just the fiction acquisitions editor. I can't imagine also what the nonfiction acquisitions folks get. So I would never have presumed on them by saying, would you? I just wouldn't have done it. But the way it happened was really through the ministry God put me into, a ministry that honestly I didn't choose. The hardest thing I've ever done. I think you know the drama I'm referring to. I do a portrayal of Mary, the mother of Jesus. And Chris, I started when I was 40. And I said to the Lord, I can't do this as an actress. I wrote it for Reader's Theater. But when the Lord said, get rid of the script, just go and tell the story, I said, I'm 40. I am too old to play a Jewish teenage version. And, and I'm Norwegian American. I'm not Jewish. I'm too old and I look wrong. And it was like God said, you need me, don't you? Yeah,
Yeah.
you're all wrong for it, which means I'm going to have to do it. For they're going to have to hear the message, despite the fact that you don't look right for the part. And Chris, would you believe that it's been almost 30 years later and opportunities still come word of mouth for me to tell that story?
Mm.
It's like God said, I don't care about how old you are, that I have never given men and women in scripture assignments based on their age, have I? Nope,
Nope.
nope, nope, you didn't. Some of the greatest assignments came during their second half or even final third of life, which I call the final trimester. And that's what I'm in. Even if I live into my 90s, as long as my mom did, I know I'm in the final trimester. So I better make good use of the time I've been given.
So how did you, all those years, uh, with as a publicist and trying to get people to interview the authors there, and you looking at this material and thinking, I could do that, or I could do better than that. How did you nurture the dream inside of you when you're in the publishing soup?
Thank you for asking. I never actually thought that I could do better than that. It's funny, it never crossed. I think because I've had a lifelong battle with insecurity. Part of it might be the Norwegian American culture in which I was raised, where you don't put yourself out there. You just don't. And my husband always encouraged me. He said, honey, God has gifted you. I want you to write a book. And I was almost a little patronizing, Chris. I said to him, oh, Mike, you don't understand the industry. They would never publish somebody like me. I'm not good enough. And Chris, I finally had to realize that it was an insult against the God who made me for me to constantly keep saying, I'm not good enough or they don't need my voice. One of my favorite quotes, and I may have used this on your radio show, is I think it was Henry Van Dyke who said, use what talents you possess. The woods would be very silent if no birds sang there, but those who sang best. And
Mm.
because I always thought, oh, Beth Moore, Ann Voskamp, Francine Rivers, Joel Rosenberg, Chris Fabry, I could never write like they do. So, so I never even entertained the thought that maybe my voice was still different than everybody else's. So it's like, I think God reached out to me through this publisher, whom I knew only because he was in the audience for a ministry presentation, to say, he's the one who affirmed me. And Chris, when that note came, I wept because I thought, do I have a book in me? Yes, for 60 years. But who would publish it? And when he said, give us a try, I thought, well, here goes nothing. But I sent it in. And when it had to really vet two publishing houses, the boutique publisher who acquired and edited my book, and then the larger publisher who is their alliance partner, just Tyndale House, who then did the design, the editing, marketing, and the distribution. It had to get through both. And and it's funny, Chris, I remember thinking, why would they publish me? Goodness knows these people need to make a living in publishing. I thought, I don't want them to take a chance on somebody who might not be able to sell enough books to keep them employed. So again, my own concern for the publishing industry kept me from trying. So I want to encourage anybody listening to us is to say, don't shut the door on yourself, because that's what I did. I never thought I was good enough. And I remember Tim Keller saying years ago, that wonderful pastor, he said, healthy self esteem is not thinking too much of yourself or too little of yourself, but just thinking of yourself less, basically, not too much, not thinking less, but thinking of yourself less. So just letting go of our preconceived notions about what we think is publishable. But at the same time, we do seek wisdom. Many authors work through an agent. That's not the way it worked for me. I did not use an agent for the first or the second book. There's a second gift book coming out in March. Um, and it's interesting, that one came about in almost a similar way, Chris. It was an editor who saw a little blog I wrote at the beginning of the pandemic called Sweet Therapy for Stressful Times. And she reached out to me and she said, that gives me an idea. What do you think? And now that little book is coming out next year. So I have learned to just wait for the timing of God because he knows how he made me. And I have never had self confidence, but I do have God confidence because I see he doesn't work in formula, but he does work, through his word, through through other believers who call out the gifts that we have. I think that's way better than us calling them out ourselves and saying, why won't somebody publish me? I'm so awesome. I've never thought that because I'm not. But to be able to let other people say, you let us be the judge of that. Just send it in and let us decide instead of you deciding you're not good enough. So maybe that's the takeaway for some of those listening to us right now.
Maggie Wallem Rowe, Rowe, is married to Mike, and it's not the Mike Rowe that does the dirty jobs guy. He's been a pastor for many years. And if you want to check out the first book that she wrote, This Life We Share, 52 Reflections on Journeying Well with God and Others, it came out in May of 2020. The next book will be out in March of 2022. And what's the title of that one again?
Oh, you have such a good memory. I mean, you got all of that, Chris. I'm amazed. The next book, it's kind of Southern leaning because of where I live now. It's called Life is Sweet, Y'all. Wit and Wisdom with a Side of Sass. So it's not an author-centric book. It's, if you sort of think of how Lucille Ball played Lucy Ricardo, it was her and it wasn't her. That's kind of what this book is. I wrote it, but I wrote it in the voice of a Southern mama or grandma who's got some wit and wisdom to dispense. And that's what this book is. It's what they call a general market book, which you're familiar with. It's the kind of thing you might pick up at the Cracker Barrel as a gift for somebody. It'll have vintage recipes and household hints and tips and quips. So it's been really fun to work on. Very different than the first book.
I love your heart, Maggie. I'm so glad to expose what you've done and what God has done through your writing to the folks at Hey, You Can Write. I'm so glad of that editor who said, hey, I think you've got something there. And now the second book that's coming out. Thanks for sharing your heart with us today.
You are so welcome. It's been such a joy. As we've been talking, I've just been mentally praying for whoever would intentionally find our conversation or maybe even stumble across it unintentionally, but that they would know that God meant for them to participate in our conversation today. And maybe we'll hear from them. And you and I are going to be clapping and cheering for them when their book comes out in a year or 2 or 10.
There you go. Thanks, Maggie.
You're welcome.